Imagine being promised something so big, so life-changing, that it feels impossible. Something you hold on to for years, even decades. Many people give up in that waiting. But this story is about someone who waited and saw the impossible become real. This is the story of Sarah, the wife of Abraham. Sarah was first known as Sarai. She was married to Abram, later called Abraham. From early in her life, Sarah carried a quiet pain. She could not have children. In her time, this was deeply painful, not just emotionally, but socially. Still, she stood beside her husband when God told Abram to leave everything familiar and journey to an unknown land. God made an incredible promise. Abram would become the father of a great nation. His descendants would be as countless as the stars in the sky. Sarah heard this promise too. She followed, even though it made no sense. How could a couple with no children, already growing older, become a great nation? Years passed. The promise remained, but the child did not come. Sarah waited. She hoped. She watched time slip away. Eventually, hope began to feel heavy. Doubt quietly moved in. Trying to make the promise happen, Sarah suggested that Abraham have a child with her servant, Hagar. Abraham agreed, and Hagar became pregnant. But instead of solving the problem, it created pain. Jealousy grew. Relationships were strained. The household was filled with tension. This moment reminds us how often human solutions, driven by fear, bring more heartbreak instead of peace. Time continued to move forward. Sarah grew older. The promise seemed more impossible than ever. Then, when Abraham was 99 years old, God spoke again. Abram became Abraham, meaning father of many, and Sarai became Sarah, meaning princess. God made the promise unmistakably clear. Sarah herself would give birth to a son. When Sarah overheard this, she laughed, not out of joy, but disbelief. She looked at her age, her body, her reality, and thought, how could this possibly happen now? And then came one of the most powerful questions ever spoken in Scripture. Is anything too hard for the Lord? That question changed everything. Despite the waiting, despite the doubt, despite the laughter, God remained faithful. Sarah became pregnant, exactly as God promised. At 90 years old, she gave birth to a son named Isaac, which means laughter. But this time her laughter was no longer disbelief, it was joy. Sarah said that God had brought her laughter, and that everyone who heard her story would laugh with her. What once felt impossible became her testimony. Sarah's story teaches us something deeply important. Waiting does not mean God has forgotten you. Doubt does not cancel God's promises, and time never limits what God can do. Her story ends not in shame, but in joy, not in silence, but in laughter. And it leaves us with a question that still speaks to us today. Is anything too hard for the Lord?